Hayes was 37 years old, earned a respectable $128,000 a year as a senior compliance officer at Northwestern Mutual, and was, at this precise moment, a prop in his wife's elaborate theater. The stage was Bavette's Steakhouse in Milwaukee's 3rd Ward, a place of dark wood, flickering gas lamps, and the low, confident hum of old money. The air was thick with the scent of dry-aged beef and expensive perfume. Alva, his wife, sat at the head of the long table, radiant under the dim lighting, her deep brown skin glowing. She was holding court with 7 of her friends, a collection of women who mirrored her own obsession with aesthetics over substance. Their laughter was loud, sharp, and frequent, punctuating stories of Tulum vacations and bidding wars over $4,200 Chanel bags. Hayes sat at the opposite end of the table, an island of quiet composure. He wore his standard off-duty uniform, a crisp $75 J.Crew button-down, and his reliable $89 Timex watch. He'd nursed the same $18 glass of Glenlivet for the past hour, a stark contrast to the parade of $25 cocktails and $150 bottles of Cabernet Sauvignon that had flowed freely to the other end of the table. He was not part of the conversation, he was the audience, the silent benefactor whose presence legitimized the entire performance. He knew his role. He was the stable, successful husband, the good man, the provider. Alva loved casting him in this role, especially in front of her friends. It was a role he had grown to despise. He had no idea just how much tonight's performance would cost him, but a cold knot was already tightening in his stomach. He knew the 3rd act was coming. It always did. He could feel the gazes of Alva's friends flicker toward him occasionally. They weren't looks of inclusion, but of assessment. They were measuring him, confirming his value in the ecosystem Alva had built. There was Brianna in a $1,200 silk dress who worked in PR and curated her life for Instagram. There was Chloe, whose husband owned 3 car dealerships, dripping in $15,000 worth of David Yurman jewelry. They saw Hayes not as a person, but as a function, the financial engine that powered Alva's lifestyle. His solid, dependable career at a Fortune 500 company was the bedrock upon which she built her world of brunches, boutique fitness classes, and weekend getaways. What they didn't see, what no one saw, was the slow, grinding erosion of his spirit, the 1,000 tiny cuts inflicted by a marriage that had become a series of transactional tests. He felt the vibration of his phone in his pocket and knew, without looking, that it was a low-balance alert from his personal checking account. He'd transferred $500 to their joint account that morning to cover the mortgage payment on their $450,000 Bayview bungalow, a house he loved more than any place on earth. The alert meant the account was now hovering around $100. It was a familiar, uncomfortable feeling. The crescendo of laughter at Alva's end of the table died down. A theatrical silence fell. This was it. The cue. The waiter, a young man with a professionally neutral expression, approached the table with a leather billfold. He placed it discreetly in the center of the table, an equal distance from everyone. But it was not for everyone. It was for Alva. She let it sit there for a full minute, building the tension. She then picked it up, her long, manicured fingers tracing the embossed logo of the restaurant. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. She slid it down the polished surface of the table. It glided silently, a dark ship sailing across a sea of mahogany until it came to a gentle stop right in front of Hayes's water glass. He looked at the billfold, then at her. Her eyes were wide, a perfect performance of vulnerability and expectation. Her friends were all watching, their smiles frozen, their bodies leaned in. The entire restaurant seemed to fade into a blur. It was 8:47 p.m. "Prove you love me," Alva said, her voice just loud enough for everyone at the table to hear. It was a whisper that carried the weight of a command. Pay the tab. Have you ever been in a situation where you realized your love was being treated like a commodity? Something to be proven with a price tag? It's a moment that changes everything. And for Hayes, this was that moment. But what Alva and her friends didn't know was that this wasn't the first test. It was just the last one he was willing to take. Their life, on the surface, was the picture of upper-middle-class black success in Milwaukee. The Bayview bungalow, which they'd bought 3 years ago for $450,000, was their masterpiece. It was a classic 1920s brick home on a quiet, tree-lined street. Hayes loved the house. He loved the original hardwood floors. He'd painstakingly refinished himself over 3 weekends, using $300 worth of materials from Home Depot. He loved the small garden in the backyard, where he grew tomatoes and basil, the soil turned with a $40 shovel and his own sweat. On Saturday mornings, he'd be up at 7 a.m., brewing a pot of $14 Collectivo coffee, the smell filling the small, sunlit kitchen. The house felt real, solid, a testament to steady work and quiet love. It was his sanctuary. Alva saw the house differently. For her, it was a backdrop. It was a stage for the life she wanted to project. The refinished floors were less about craftsmanship and more about a rustic chic aesthetic for her Instagram stories. The garden was a charming accessory she'd point out to guests before serving a salad made with store-bought lettuce. Their domestic normalcy was a carefully curated facade, and every detail had a price. The sofa in the living room, a piece Hayes found impractical, but which Alva insisted was perfect, was a $6,000 piece from Restoration Hardware. The abstract painting above it, which Hayes thought looked like a chaotic mess, had cost $3,500 from a gallery in the 3rd Ward. Their wedding photos were displayed in heavy, ornate silver frames that cost $250 each. Hayes's contributions were less visible but more fundamental. He was the one who managed the budget, who set up the automatic bill payments, who monitored their joint savings account, a fund that never seemed to grow, no matter how much he contributed from his $128,000 salary. Alva, who worked part-time as a social media consultant for local boutiques, contributed erratically to their finances. Her income, roughly $30,000 a year, mostly went to what she called business expenses: her wardrobe, her lunches, her white BMW 3 Series, a $43,000 car with a monthly payment that made Hayes's stomach clench. His own car was a 2012 Toyota Camry with 187,000 miles on it, paid off years ago. He was fine with it. It was reliable. It got him to his office in the gleaming glass Northwestern Mutual Tower downtown and back home again. That was all he needed. The Prove You Love Me tests had started small, almost playfully. The first time was about a year into their marriage. They were at a street festival in Wauwatosa, the suburb where Alva grew up and where most of her friends still lived. It was a world away from Bayview's unpretentious, artsy vibe. Wauwatosa was all manicured lawns and high-end boutiques. Alva spotted a pair of leather boots in a shop window. They were beautiful, handmade, and cost $800. "Oh, Hayes, I adore them," she'd sighed, her hand on his arm. "But I can't possibly. It's too much." She had played the part of the responsible partner perfectly. He, wanting to be the generous husband, had said, "If you love them, you should have them." Her face lit up. "Really? You'd do that for me? It's like you're proving you love me." The phrase hung in the air, sweet and a little manipulative. He bought the boots. She wore them once, posted a picture on Instagram with the hashtag #BestHusband, and then they were relegated to the back of her overflowing closet, a closet that held at least $20,000 worth of clothes and shoes. He felt a brief warmth at her happiness, but also a faint disquieting chill The tests became a recurring theme, a private joke that wasn't funny. It was always in public, always with an audience. At a charity gala for the Milwaukee Art Museum, she publicly pledged $1,000 in his name without consulting him first. When he looked at her, stunned, she'd squeezed his hand under the table and whispered, "Show them what a generous heart you have. Prove you love our community and me." He'd written the check, his hand tight, the applause of strangers feeling like a judgment. His own charitable giving was quiet, a monthly $50 donation to a local food bank, something he never spoke about. Alva's philanthropy was a performance. Another time, her friend Brianna was complaining about needing a last-minute flight to a conference in Austin. The tickets were over $900. Alva, full of performative sympathy, turned to Hayes. "Honey, Brianna is so stressed. You're so good with this stuff. Could you just handle it for her, please? Prove you're the best friend a girl could ask for." He was no longer just proving his love for his wife, but for her entire social circle. He'd bought the ticket on his personal credit card, a card he tried to keep for emergencies only. Brianna had paid him back a month later, but not before Alva had posted a gushing tribute to his generosity, framing it as a spontaneous act of kindness from her wonderful husband. He was beginning to feel less like a partner and more like a walking, talking ATM with a good credit score. The facade of their domestic life was beginning to crack, and behind it, Hayes saw something cold and calculating. He just didn't have the proof yet. The cruelty escalated, becoming more public and more humiliating. The incidents were no longer playful tests. They were calculated power plays, designed to reinforce her control and his compliance. Each betrayal was a scene, a carefully staged piece of theater where Hayes was the unwitting star, and the currency was his dignity. One particularly galling episode took place on a Saturday afternoon in a crowded cafe in the 3rd Ward. They were having brunch with Alva's parents, a stiff, judgmental couple who had never fully approved of Hayes. They found his quiet nature underwhelming and his job in compliance terribly dull. Alva's father, a retired surgeon, had spent most of the meal talking about his stock portfolio. Her mother critiqued the decor. Hayes had been trying to engage them, talking about a recent compliance project that had saved Northwestern Mutual a potential 7-figure fine, but their eyes had glazed over. As the meal ended, Alva announced brightly, "My treat, everyone." She reached into her $3,200 YSL handbag, rummaged around for a moment, and then her face fell into a mask of theatrical panic. "Oh no, I can't believe it. I must have left my wallet in my other purse." She turned to Hayes, her eyes wide and pleading. Her parents were watching, their expressions a mixture of pity and disdain. "Hayes, baby, you'll get this, won't you? I am so embarrassed." The bill was $220. It wasn't the money that stung. It was the deliberate public emasculation. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that her wallet was sitting right there in her purse. He'd seen her put it in before they left the house. But to challenge her would be to cause a scene, to confirm her parents' worst opinions of him. He was trapped. "Of course, dear," he said, his voice even. He pulled out his wallet and paid with his own debit card, the same one that would later trigger a low balance alert at Bavette's. Alva's mother gave him a thin, pitying smile. "Alva, you are so lucky to have a man who takes care of you," she'd said, the words dripping with condescension. On the drive home, Alva was silent, tapping away on her phone. A few hours later, a post appeared on her Instagram. A picture of her parents captioned, "So blessed to be able to treat my amazing parents to brunch. Family is everything." There was no mention of Hayes or his wallet. The lie was so blatant, so shameless, it took his breath away. The betrayals began to bleed into his professional life. Alva had a cousin, Marcus, who was perpetually between jobs. He was charming but unreliable, with a string of failed ventures behind him. Alva became convinced that Hayes could get Marcus a job at Northwestern Mutual. "He just needs a foot in the door," she insisted one evening, as Hayes was trying to decompress after a long day of reviewing complex regulatory documents. "He's great with people. He'd be perfect in sales." "Alva, that's not how it works," Hayes explained patiently. "He needs to have the right licenses, the Series 7, the 63. It's a highly regulated industry. I can't just get him a job." Her face hardened. "So you won't even try? You won't even put in a good word for my family? Some husband you are." "I can refer him to the online portal. He can apply like anyone else if he has the qualifications." "The qualifications," she scoffed, the word sounding like an insult. "It's about who you know. You know people. You're a senior officer. Don't you have any power? What is the point of your fancy title if you can't even help my cousin?" The conversation went in circles for an hour. Finally, exhausted, Hayes agreed to forward Marcus's resume to a contact in HR, with the heavy caveat that he could make no promises. 2 weeks later, Hayes was called into his director's office. His director, a stern but fair man named Mr. Henderson, looked grim. "Hayes, we have a problem." He slid a printout of an email across his desk. It was from Marcus to the head of recruitment. In it, Marcus claimed that Hayes had personally guaranteed him an interview and had assured him that his lack of licenses was a mere formality that could be waived. He had name-dropped Hayes a dozen times, implying a level of influence that was not only untrue, but deeply unprofessional. Hayes felt a hot flush of shame creep up his neck. He had spent 10 years building a reputation for integrity and meticulousness at that company. In one email, Alva's cousin, enabled by her, had put it all at risk. He spent the next hour explaining the situation to Mr. Henderson, who was thankfully understanding but issued a stern warning about mixing family and business. The outrage accumulated in Hayes's chest, a cold, heavy weight. Alva's reckless disregard for his career, for the very foundation of their financial stability, was a betrayal deeper than any forgotten wallet. When he confronted her that night, she was completely unrepentant. "Marcus was just being proactive," she'd said defensively. "You're too passive, Hayes. Sometimes you have to be aggressive to get what you want." She didn't see it as a betrayal. She saw it as a failed strategy, and the failure, in her eyes, was his. The final straw before the Bavette's dinner was the incident with the watch. For his 37th birthday, Hayes had wanted one thing, a vintage Omega Seamaster from the 1960s. He'd been watching one on eBay for months. It was elegant, understated, and cost $1,500. It was an indulgence, but one he felt he could justify. He'd sent the link to Alva several times, hinting broadly. He imagined wearing it, the quiet satisfaction of a classic timepiece on his wrist, a symbol of his own hard-won success. On the morning of his birthday, Alva presented him with a large, gaudy box. Inside was a massive, gold-plated watch from a brand he'd never heard of, encrusted with what were clearly fake diamonds. It was the kind of watch a rapper might wear in a music video. It was ostentatious, loud, and utterly devoid of taste. It had probably cost $300 at a mall kiosk. "What do you think?" she asked, beaming. "It's so you, bold, successful." He looked at the monstrous thing, then at her. He felt nothing. The disconnect between who he was and who she thought he was, or rather, who she wanted him to be, had never been more apparent. "It's a lot, Alva," he said, struggling to keep his voice neutral. Her smile faltered. "You don't like it?" "It's not really my style." Her face collapsed into performative tears. "I spent weeks looking for the perfect gift. I thought you'd want something that showed off your status. My husband, the senior compliance officer, and you hate it. You just hate it." She stormed out of the room, leaving him with the hideous watch. The fight lasted 2 days. He was accused of being ungrateful, of having no style, of embarrassing her. She never once asked what he might have wanted. The betrayal wasn't about the watch itself. It was about the complete and utter lack of recognition of him as a person. She wasn't buying a gift for him. She was buying an accessory for the husband character she'd created. The vintage Omega he'd wanted represented history, craftsmanship, and quiet confidence. The watch she'd given him represented nothing but a cheap, hollow facade. It was a perfect metaphor for their marriage. The day after the birthday watch fiasco, something in Hayes shifted. The accumulated outrage finally solidified into cold, clear purpose. He was no longer a participant in Alva's drama. He was an observer, a data analyst in his own life. He needed to understand the mechanics of her manipulation. He started playing dumb, feigning the same placid compliance she had come to expect, but his mind was working, connecting dots, searching for a pattern. He started with the forgotten wallet at the brunch with her parents. It seemed too convenient, too perfectly staged. On a Tuesday afternoon, while Alva was at a yoga class, he went into her closet. The closet itself was a monument to her spending. Rows of designer shoes totaling over $10,000, racks of clothes, many with the tags still on. He found the purse she had used that day, a $400 Tory Burch tote. He reached inside, and there it was, her wallet, a slim $450 Saint Laurent card holder, just as he'd suspected. It was a small thing, but it was a concrete lie. He took a picture of it with his phone, time-stamped at 2:15 p.m. on a Tuesday. Evidence. He started paying closer attention to her finances, not to control her, but to gather information. He had access to their joint accounts, but he suspected the real story was elsewhere. He remembered Brianna, the friend whose $900 flight to Austin he had paid for. Alva had claimed Brianna was so stressed and couldn't afford it. He recalled that Brianna had eventually paid him back. But how? He'd received a check in the mail a month later. It had seemed odd at the time. He logged into his Venmo account, an app he rarely used. He scrolled back through his transaction history. Nothing. Then he had an idea. He searched for Alva's public feed. He scrolled down, past pictures of expensive cocktails and designer shoes, and then he found it. A transaction from Brianna to Alva, dated the day after he bought the plane ticket. The amount was $950. The note was a string of emojis. A plane, a martini glass, and a heart. Brianna hadn't been broke. She had sent the money to Alva immediately. Alva had held on to it for a month, earning praise from her friends and interest in her own savings account, before finally having Brianna mail a check to Hayes. She had used his money as a float and his generosity as a plot point in her social media narrative. He felt a surge of icy calm. This was the pattern. He started digging deeper. He found more transactions. A payment of $500 from her friend Chloe with the note, "For the gala table," dated 2 days before the Milwaukee Art Museum event where Alva had publicly volunteered Hayes to donate $1,000. She hadn't pledged his money. She had double-dipped, collecting money from her friends for a table and then leveraging Hayes for a separate public donation, making herself look twice as generous. She was monetizing his compliance. He spent the next 2 weeks in a state of quiet vigilance. He was the perfect husband. He cooked her favorite dinner, pan-seared salmon with asparagus, on Wednesday night, listening patiently as she complained about a rival social media consultant. The salmon cost $22 from Whole Foods, the asparagus $6. He complimented the $2,400 Burberry dress she wore to a friend's engagement party, a dress he knew they couldn't afford. He feigned sleep when she came to bed late, smelling of wine and perfume after girls' night. All the while, he was building a file. He created a password-protected folder on his personal laptop. He took screenshots of the Venmo transactions. He downloaded their joint bank statements and highlighted Alva's extravagant purchases. He found the receipts for the charity pledge and the plane ticket. He wrote down dates, times, and conversations, creating a meticulous log of the financial and emotional manipulation. Each lie was a scene he documented with the dispassionate precision of a compliance officer reviewing a case file. The man who reviewed complex financial regulations for a living was now auditing his own marriage. The evidence was irrefutable. The betrayal was systemic. He was living inside a carefully constructed fraud, and the knowledge was a heavy, cold stone in his gut. He was playing a part just like her. The only difference was that he knew the show was about to end. The invitation to Bavette's came via a group text from Alva a week before the dinner. Celebrating Chloe's promotion. Let's go all out, girls. And my amazing hubby is treating. Hayes saw the text while sitting in his cubicle on the 27th floor of the Northwestern Mutual Tower. The city of Milwaukee spread out below him, a grid of streets and buildings under a clear blue sky. From up here, everything looked orderly, logical. His life, by contrast, felt like a chaotic mess. He read the winking emoji and felt a familiar wave of nausea. This was it, the big one. A dinner for 8 people at one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. He knew, with absolute certainty, that this would be the grand finale of her Prove You Love Me tour. He replied to the group text with a simple, "Sounds great, looking forward to it." The lie tasted like ash in his mouth. For the next week, he prepared. He transferred the majority of the money from their joint savings account, a little over $15,000, of which he had contributed nearly all, into a new personal savings account at a different bank. He left just $1,000 in the joint account. It was a preemptive strike, a quiet act of self-preservation. He met with a financial planner, a colleague from work, and went over his 401k, his stock options, and his pension. He wanted to understand exactly what was his, what was theirs, and what was at risk. He felt a grim satisfaction in the process. He was taking back control, one spreadsheet at a time. The night of the dinner, he stood in their bedroom as Alva got ready. She was a whirlwind of activity, pulling dresses from her closet, trying on shoes, applying makeup with the focus of a surgeon. She finally selected an emerald green dress that cost $950. "How do I look?" she asked, twirling in front of the full-length mirror. "You look beautiful, Alva," he said, and it was true. She was a beautiful woman. But as he looked at her, he no longer saw the woman he had married. He saw a stranger, a performer, who had cast him in a role he could no longer play. He felt a profound sense of loss, a grief for the marriage he thought he had. They drove to the 3rd Ward in her white BMW. The silence in the car was thick with unspoken things. She was scrolling through Instagram, already curating the evening. He was mentally rehearsing his lines, not for her play, but for his own. The scene at Bavette's was exactly as he'd anticipated. The friends, the fawning over Chloe's promotion, the endless rounds of expensive drinks. He was a ghost at the table, a silent witness to their vacuous conversation. They talked about their Peloton scores, the outrageous cost of preschool, and the new Dior collection. No one asked him about his work. No one asked him about his life. He didn't exist beyond his function as the evening's financier. He ate his $75 filet mignon and listened. At one point, Brianna raised her glass. A toast to Alva for having the most generous husband in the world. They all cheered, clinking their glasses. They looked at him, their eyes shining with a mixture of envy and expectation. He simply smiled and raised his water glass. Then came the moment. The waiter, the billfold, the slow slide across the table. It landed in front of him, a dark leather rectangle of judgment. He looked up at Alva, her face a perfect picture of hopeful anticipation. Her friends were rapt. The silence was absolute. "Prove you love me," she said, her voice a silken command. "Pay the tab." Hayes felt a strange sense of peace descend upon him. The knot in his stomach was gone. The anger, the humiliation, the years of quiet suffering, it all receded, replaced by a crystalline clarity. He had the file on his laptop. He had the new bank account. He had his integrity. He had everything he needed. He picked up the billfold and opened it. The total was printed in stark black ink at the bottom of a long list of extravagant food and drink. 2,147 52s. He didn't flinch. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet. Not his debit card, which he knew would be declined, but the American Express card he kept for work emergencies. It had a high limit and would earn him a significant number of reward points. He placed the card neatly into the billfold. He looked up, first at Alva, then he let his gaze travel slowly around the table, meeting the eyes of each of her friends. He smiled. It was not a forced smile, not a pained smile. It was a genuine, relaxed, almost beatific smile. It was the smile of a man who was completely and utterly free. "Of course," he said, his voice calm and steady. "It's my pleasure to celebrate with you all." He handed the billfold back to the waiter. The tension at the table broke. Alva's friends erupted into another round of cheers. Alva herself looked triumphant, basking in the glory of her husband's public compliance. But there was a flicker of something else in her eyes. Confusion. His reaction was not what she had expected. She had expected a moment of hesitation, a pained look, a silent argument that she would win. She had not expected this easy, smiling acquiescence. He had not played his part correctly. He had skipped to a new scene, one she hadn't written, and it unnerved her. The strike was not the moment he paid the bill. The strike was silent, methodical, and executed with the precision of a compliance audit. It began the moment he left the restaurant. After the waiter returned with the credit card slip, Hayes signed it, added a generous 25% tip, another $711, bringing the total to over $3,500. He stood up. "Well, ladies, it was a wonderful evening. Chloe, congratulations again." He nodded politely to the group. He turned to Alva. "I'm going to head home. I have an early morning." She looked stunned. "You're not waiting for me?" "No," he said, his smile never wavering. "You enjoy your night." He leaned in and kissed her on the cheek. It felt like kissing a marble statue. Then he turned and walked out of Bavette's, not looking back. He left her there, the queen of the table, suddenly stripped of her most important accessory. He took an Uber back to Bayview, the $20 fare a small price for his freedom. The ride through the quiet streets of Milwaukee felt like a journey to a new life. He spent the weekend in a state of focused activity. He packed a small bag with a week's worth of clothes. He gathered his important documents, his passport, his birth certificate, his social security card. He backed up the file of evidence against Alva onto a secure thumb drive, a sleek $30 SanDisk, and then wiped his personal laptop clean. He wrote a brief, simple note and left it on the kitchen counter, next to the $6,000 restoration hardware sofa. It read, "Alva, I have moved out. My attorney will be in contact with you on Monday." On Monday morning at 8 a.m., Hayes was not at his desk at Northwestern Mutual. He was sitting in the plush client chair of a law office on the 40th floor of the U.S. Bank Center, the tallest building in Wisconsin. The view of Lake Michigan was vast and calming. He had chosen his attorney carefully. Ms. Zara Adebayo was one of the most respected and feared family law attorneys in the state. She was a sharp, impeccably dressed black woman in her 50s, with a reputation for being meticulous, strategic, and utterly ruthless in the defense of her clients. Her hourly rate was $1,200, and Hayes knew she would be worth every penny. He had brought a single, slim black binder with him. He placed it on the polished mahogany table between them. "Ms. Adebayo," he began, his voice steady, "my wife has been engaging in a pattern of financial and emotional manipulation for the past 3 years. I have documented it. He opened the binder. For the next hour, he walked her through the evidence. He presented the time-stamped photo of the wallet in the purse. He showed her the Venmo screenshots, each one corresponding to a public test of his generosity. He had created a spreadsheet that detailed every incident, with columns for the date, the amount of money involved, the public setting, and the corresponding social media post Alva had made. The total financial impact of the tests he could quantify came to just over $1,700. That didn't include the emotional toll, which was incalculable. Ms. Adebayo listened intently, her expression unreadable. She examined each piece of evidence, her sharp eyes missing nothing. She read the text messages where he had sent Alva the link to the vintage Omega watch, followed by the photos of the gaudy monstrosity she had bought him instead. She looked at the email from Alva's cousin Marcus that had jeopardized Hayes' career. When he was finished, she closed the binder and looked at him. A slow, appreciative smile spread across her face. "Mr. Williams," she said, her voice rich with professional admiration, "you have done your homework. This is not just a divorce filing. This is a case of dissipation of marital assets and, frankly, financial malfeasance. Her prove you love me tests are not just cruel. They are a form of fraud." She leaned forward. "We will file this morning. We will petition for exclusive possession of the marital home, given your documentation that you are the primary financial contributor and her actions have created an untenable living environment. We will argue that her pattern of behavior constitutes a deliberate depletion of your shared assets for her own personal and social gain. We will subpoena her friends. We will subpoena her bank records and credit card statements. She wanted a performance, Mr. Williams. We are about to give her the performance of a lifetime, only this time, it will be in a courtroom, and the audience will be a judge." By 11 hours a.m., the divorce petition was filed electronically with the Milwaukee County Courthouse. By 2:30 p.m., a process server, a burly man who charged a flat fee of $150, arrived at the Bay View bungalow. Alva was home, likely still recovering from her weekend of celebrating her victory. She answered the door in a $300 silk robe. The man handed her the papers. The strike was complete. The world Alva had so carefully constructed was about to be systematically dismantled. The meeting with Ms. Adebayo was the turning point from victim to strategist. Hayes, who spent his days ensuring that complex financial transactions adhered to a strict set of rules, was now applying that same rigor to the dissolution of his own life. The law office, with its panoramic views and quiet, focused energy, felt more like home to him than his own house had in years. "The key here," Ms. Adebayo explained, tapping a perfectly manicured finger on the binder, "is to frame this not as a simple, no-fault divorce, but as a divorce with significant financial misconduct. Wisconsin is a marital property state, which means a 50-50 split is the presumption. Our job is to show the court that a 50-50 split would be inequitable due to her actions." She laid out the plan with military precision. Phase 1 was discovery. "We will send a comprehensive request for production of documents. We want everything. Her personal bank statements for the last 5 years, her credit card bills, her Venmo and PayPal history, all of her social media data, including deleted posts and direct messages. We will depose her and her friends. We will ask them, under oath, about the dinner at Bavette's. We will ask them about the charity gala. We will ask them about the plane ticket to Austin." Hayes felt a surge of validation. For years, he had felt like he was going crazy, that he was being overly sensitive or ungenerous. Seeing his private pain laid out as a valid legal strategy was profoundly empowering. "What about the house?" he asked, his voice quiet. The thought of losing the bungalow, his sanctuary, was the one thing that truly scared him. "The house is our priority," Ms. Adebayo stated firmly. "We will argue that the down payment came primarily from your premarital assets, We will show that you have made every single mortgage payment from your personal income, while her contributions were erratic and her spending habits actively undermined your ability to build equity. We will attach your spreadsheet as Exhibit A to our motion for unequal division of property. She pointed to the Bavette's dinner receipt, which Hayes had retrieved from his American Express account online. The total was $3,559.40 after the tip. This dinner is our cornerstone piece of evidence, she said. 8 people. She publicly coerced you into paying a bill of over $3,500. That is not a marital expense. That is waste. We will categorize it and every other test as a dissipation of marital assets. The court does not look kindly on one spouse essentially stealing from the marital pot to fund their lifestyle and entertain their friends. They spent another hour meticulously compiling the evidence into a formal legal document. Ms. Adebayo dictated to her paralegal, her language precise and devastating. A multi-year pattern of coercive financial abuse, using public spectacles to extract funds, systematic deception for personal social aggrandizement. Each phrase was a nail in the coffin of Alva's narrative. The cost of this strategic planning was not small. Ms. Adebayo's retainer was $15,000, which Hayes paid from the funds he had secured in his new savings account. It was the best money he had ever spent. It was an investment in his own future, his own peace. He was no longer just protecting his assets. He was reclaiming his life. The consequences cascaded almost immediately. The first sign of Alva's collapse came in the form of a series of voicemails left on Hayes's phone on Monday evening, just hours after she was served. He was staying in a short-term corporate apartment downtown that cost $2,200 for the month, a sterile but peaceful space. He let each call go to voicemail, listening to them later with Ms. Adebayo's advice in mind. Do not engage. Let her speak. It's all evidence. The first voicemail, left at 3:15 p.m., was pure confusion. Hayes, I got these papers. I don't understand. Is this a joke? Call me back right now. This isn't funny. The second, at 4:30 p.m., was angry and accusatory. How dare you? After everything I've done for you, for us, you're going to divorce me because you had to pay for one dinner? One dinner? You are the most ungrateful, pathetic man I have ever met. You are trying to ruin my life. The third, at 7 p.m., shifted to pleading. Baby, please, I'm sorry. I was just teasing you. It was a joke. All the girls do it with their husbands. We can fix this. Just come home. Please, Hayes, I love you. Don't do this to us. The final voicemail of the night, left just before midnight, was a raw, sobbing breakdown. You've frozen the accounts. The joint credit card was declined. I can't pay for anything. What am I supposed to do? You've left me with nothing. You monster. You've destroyed everything. The next wave of consequences hit her social circle. Ms. Adebayo, true to her word, sent subpoenas to all 7 of the friends who had been at Bavette's. They were being called for depositions. The reaction was swift. Brianna, the PR specialist, was the first to call Alva, her voice a panicked shriek. Hayes knew this because Brianna, in her haste and fury, accidentally left a 2-minute voicemail on his phone instead of Alva's. Alva, what the hell is this? I got a subpoena. Your husband is suing me? I have to hire a lawyer. This is going to cost me thousands. You need to fix this right now. I am not getting dragged into your messy psycho divorce. The friend group, a unit built on the flimsy foundations of brunch and shared gossip, fractured within a week. Chloe, whose husband owned the car dealerships, had her own high-powered attorney who advised her to distance herself from Alva completely. The others followed suit. Suddenly, Alva's phone went silent. Her brunch invitations dried up. Her social world, the only world she valued, had evaporated. the legal downfall was just as swift. At the first mediation session, Alva and her new, vastly outmatched attorney tried to argue for half of everything: half the house equity, half of Hayes's 401k, half of his pension. Ms. Adebayo calmly presented the binder of evidence. She played the audio of Brianna's accidental, frantic voicemail. She showed the judge the Venmo transactions cross-referenced with Alva's Instagram posts. The mediator, a retired judge, looked at Alva's attorney and said, "You have a serious problem here. Your client's credibility is zero." The final settlement was a complete victory for Hayes. The judge ruled that Alva's actions constituted a severe dissipation of marital assets. Hayes was awarded the Bay View bungalow in its entirety. He kept 100% of his retirement accounts and his pension. Alva was forced to take responsibility for the $25,000 in credit card debt she had secretly accrued on personal cards. She was awarded a small, one-time alimony payment of $10,000, barely enough to cover her legal fees. She was ordered to vacate the house within 30 days. Her white BMW, with its crippling $700 monthly payment, was repossessed 2 months later. Her life, a glittering facade built with someone else's money and integrity, had crumbled to dust. She had lost the house, the money, the friends, and the husband she had so profoundly underestimated. 2 years later, the Bayview bungalow was a different place. The ghost of Alva's expensive, soulless decor was gone. The $6,000 restoration hardware sofa had been sold on Facebook Marketplace for $800, and in its place sat a comfortable, deep-seated couch from a local furniture maker that had cost $1,800. The walls were painted a warm, calming gray, and they were decorated not with abstract art, but with architectural prints of Milwaukee landmarks and photos of Hayes with his family and friends. Real friends. The house felt lived in, authentic. It felt like him. The garden in the back was thriving, producing an abundance of tomatoes, peppers, and herbs. Hayes was thriving too. He was still at Northwestern Mutual, where he had been promoted to Director of Compliance, a position that came with a salary of $175,000. But his real passion had become mentorship. He had started a program within the company to mentor young Black professionals just starting their careers in finance. He met with them once a week, offering guidance not just on navigating the corporate world, but on building a life of integrity and purpose. He taught them about the importance of financial literacy, of living within their means, of distinguishing between true value and the illusion of status. On a bright Saturday morning in July, Hayes was walking along the path in Lake Park, the sun warming his face. The deep blue of Lake Michigan stretched out to the horizon. He felt a sense of peace that he hadn't realized was possible. His life was quiet, but it was full. It was his own. He no longer felt the need to prove anything to anyone. He checked the time on a new watch. It was an Omega Seamaster, a 1964 model with a beautiful, clean, white dial. He had bought it for himself for his 39th birthday. It had cost him $1,600, paid for from his own savings, and every time he looked at it, he felt a quiet surge of pride. It represented not status, but self-respect. Later that afternoon, he was sitting on his front porch when one of his mentees, a bright young analyst named Jamal, stopped by. Jamal had just passed his Series 7 exam and had come to thank Hayes for his help. He handed Hayes a small framed drawing. It was a picture Jamal's 6-year-old daughter, Maya, had drawn. It showed 2 figures, one tall and one small, both drawn with a brown crayon. They were holding hands under a smiling sun. Underneath, in a child's scrawl, it said, "Thank you, Mr. Hayes." Hayes looked at the simple drawing, at the earnest, heartfelt figures. This, he thought, was real value. This was authentic connection. It wasn't transactional. It was built on shared experience and genuine care. Alva had demanded he prove his love with a price tag, forcing him to purchase public displays of affection. But he had learned that love, respect, and worth are not things you buy in a restaurant or a boutique. They are things you build quietly and patiently through acts of service, through integrity, and through the steadfast refusal to let anyone else define your value. True wealth isn't about what you can afford to buy. It's about what you can't bear to sell. He had almost sold his soul for a quiet life, but in the end, by choosing to honor himself, he had gained a world far richer than any dinner tab could ever represent. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to reclaim your own self-worth? Share your story in the comments below. We find strength in knowing we are not alone. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to Love Beyond Pride for more stories of integrity and renewal.